Hey guys, and welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you how to crochet 5 beginner-friendly stitches that are perfect for blankets. We have the crunch stitch, the mini bean stitch, the blanket stitch, the granny stripe stitch, and the moss stitch. Each of these stitches are really great for blankets, but they can also be used for different things. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be creating a tutorial that teaches you how to make a blanket with any size using any stitch. When I'm finished with that tutorial, I will link it in the description. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified anytime I release a new video. Now for today's stitch tutorial, I used Millamia Naturally Soft Aran. And these little balls of yarn are so soft, they come in the most beautiful colors, and they are great for stitch definition, which is why I love to use them for my stitch tutorials. However, I would not use them for blankets. And the only reason is because they come in these little 50-gram balls, so you would have to buy a whole bunch in order to make a blanket. So in the description, you will find a list of my favorite blanket yarns. Now, without further delay, let's crochet.
Sigourney, how's your macaroni?
Now, in order for the blanket stitch to work, we have to create a foundation chain in multiples of 3. So first, create your slip knot, and I'm using a 5.5 millimeter hook today. So because we have to create our foundation chain in multiples of 3, I'm going to create a chain of 27. So to create your chain, you're going to yarn over and pull that loop through the loop on your hook. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. If you've never crocheted before and you need additional help, I have a full 14-day masterclass that you can check out. All right, so I have 27 chains here. And to make the blanket stitch, we're going to place 2 double crochet into the 3rd chain from your hook. And remember that I am in the US, so I'm speaking US terms. So a double crochet in the US is a treble crochet in the UK. So to double crochet, you're going to yarn over and insert your hook into the 3rd chain. So this is chain 1, 2, and 3. Insert your hook into that 3rd chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops, and that's a double crochet. So now we're going to double crochet again into that same chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into that same chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now we're going to skip 2 chains, so 1, 2, and we're going to place our next set of stitches into that 3rd chain. So to single crochet, you're going to insert your hook into that 3rd chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. Now we'll place 2 double crochet into that same chain. So again, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now double crochet again into that same chain. So you should have 1 single crochet and 2 double crochet all in that same chain. Now again, we're going to skip 2 chains. So 1, 2, and then single crochet, and then 2 double crochet into that same chain, just like we did. So single crochet, double crochet, and then another double crochet. Skip 2 chains, and then 1 single crochet and 2 double crochet into the next chain. Now repeat that pattern until you have 3 chains left. So now I have 3 chains left. I'm going to skip these 2 chains and single crochet into my last chain. And that is the first row for the blanket stitch. Now for round 2, we're going to chain 2. So 1, 2, and turn your work. Now place 2 double crochet into that very first stitch here. So if you're looking at it like this, it might look hard to count, but if you turn it over, you can see the V's at the top of each stitch, and that's how we'll count our skipped stitches. So here's 1 stitch, 2 stitch, and we're going to work into that 3rd stitch here. So place 1 single crochet, and then 2 double crochet into that same space. And we're going to repeat that same thing. So skip 2 stitches and place 1 single crochet and 2 double crochet into the next. Now we're going to repeat that same step all the way until you reach the last 3 stitches. So skip the next 2 stitches and then single crochet into the next, and then 2 double crochet into the same stitch. So now that we've reached the last 3 stitches, you can see 1, 2, and then this stitch is the chain 2 that we skipped at the beginning of the first round. So that chain 2 counts as a stitch. So what we're going to do is skip these 2 double crochet stitches and single crochet at the top of the chain 2. Now for rows 3 and on, we're just going to repeat row 2. So go ahead and chain 2 and turn your work. Place 2 double crochet into that very first stitch. Then skip the next 2 stitches, single crochet and 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Skip the next 2 stitches, single crochet and 2 double crochet into the next. So just continue repeating row 2 until you reach your desired length. Sometimes with video, it's hard to show you exactly what I'm doing. So I always try to include a picture tutorial as well. So if you're finding this video hard to follow, click the link in the description that will send you to the step-by-step picture tutorial. And hopefully that will help you a little bit more. And if you ever come across any questions, just leave them in the comments. Once you're happy with your length, you will cut your yarn, leaving at least 3 to 5 inches, then yarn over and pull that strand all the way through. And that's how you tie off your work. Once you weave in your ends, then you're all done. So that's how you crochet the blanket stitch. Next we have the moss stitch, which is one of my favorite stitches ever. It is so beautiful and can be used for so many different kinds of projects. It's not only great for blankets, but it's great for scarves, headbands, and even dishcloths. And it's one of the most popular. So this is a great stitch to know. Now to make the moss stitch work, we have to create a foundation chain and multiples of 2. So for this practice swatch, I'm going to chain 26. After you chain 26, we're going to single crochet into the second chain from your hook. So here's the first chain and the second chain. So to single crochet, insert your hook into that second chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2. Now chain 1, and we're going to skip the next chain and single crochet into the next chain. And we're going to repeat that across. So chain 1, skip the next chain and single crochet into the next. Chain 1, skip the next chain, single crochet into the next. And repeat that down the row. When you have 2 chains left, chain 1, skip the next chain and single crochet into the last chain. So this is what your first row should look like. Now for row 2, we're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And this is where things get a little bit different. So if you've tried this stitch before and you've had a hard time keeping your edges straight, it's because the most popular way that this is written is a little bit confusing. So I found a way to make it work that makes it a lot easier to count your stitches. So after you chain 1, we're going to single crochet into this very first stitch here. Remember to turn your work to look at the top if you can't recognize the back of your stitches yet. Single crochet into that very first stitch. And then we're going to single crochet into this chain 1 space, so this space here. So here's our chain 1, and this is the space underneath. We're going to go inside that space. Now chain 1, skip the next single crochet, and single crochet into that next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, and single crochet into that next space in between the 2 single crochet. And repeat that to the last stitch. So I just single crocheted into our last chain space, and without chaining, we're just going to single crochet into the last stitch. So this is what row 2 should look like. Now for row 3, we're going to chain 1 and turn your work. Now single crochet into the very first stitch, chain 1, skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next chain 1 space. And repeat that down the row until you reach the last 2 stitches. So now we have 2 single crochet stitches left. We're going to chain 1, skip the next single crochet, and single crochet into that very last stitch. And so this is what it should look like at the end of row 3. Now you're just going to repeat rows 2 and 3 until you reach your desired length. At the end of row 18, this is what it starts to look like, and the back looks exactly the same. Next we have the granny stripe stitch. This stitch is really quick to work up, and it's really fun. Plus you could make one beautiful blanket with a bunch of different colors. So let me show you how to crochet the granny stripe stitch. For the granny stripe stitch, we're going to need to create a chain in multiples of 3 plus 2. So for my practice swatch, I started with a chain of 23. Now single crochet in the second chain from your hook, so 1, 2, and then single crochet in each chain down the row. So for row 1, we just single crocheted in each chain down. Now for row 2, we're going to chain 3, and that chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and turn your work. Now double crochet into that very first stitch. So this stitch right here. Now skip 2 stitches and place 3 double crochet into that next stitch. So we put 3 double crochet all in that one stitch. Now again, skip 2 stitches and place 3 double crochet into the next. And we're just going to repeat that down the row until you reach the last 3 stitches. So once you reach the last 3 stitches, we're going to skip these next 2 chains and place 2 double crochet into that last stitch. And this is what it should look like at the end of row 2. For row 3, you're going to chain 3, turn your work, and we're going to skip this next double crochet and place 3 double crochet into this space here. So we're not going into any stitches, we're just going right into that space. Skip the next 3 double crochet and place 3 double crochet into the next space. And this is why this stitch seems to work up really fast, because you're not working into any stitches, you're just working into the spaces. So just continue that down the row, working 3 double crochet into each space. After you place 3 double crochet into your last space, you'll have 2 double crochet left, the double crochet stitch and the chain 3 from the previous round. So we're going to skip the next double crochet and place your last double crochet into the top of that chain 3. And that's the end of row 3. So this is what it should look like. Now from this point forward, we're just going to repeat rows 2 and 3 until you reach your desired length. By the end of row 11, this is what it should look like. So that's it for the granny stripe stitch. Next, we're going to learn how to crochet the mini bean stitch. I love this stitch because it's kind of like a sideways puff stitch. There's a lot of texture to it, and it would make a great blanket, scarf, washcloth, headband, pretty much anything. This is a gorgeous stitch, and again, this one is also reversible. So let's learn how to crochet the mini bean stitch. Now to make the mini bean stitch work, we have to create a foundation chain and multiples of 2 plus 1. So for this practice swatch, I'm going to chain 23. Now we're going to place our first mini bean stitch into the 3rd chain from your hook. So to create a mini bean stitch, insert your hook into the 3rd chain. So we have 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and you'll want to pull it up just like this. Then yarn over and insert your hook into that same chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and you will have 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through all 4 loops, and then chain 1 to secure. So that's your first mini bean stitch. Now we're going to skip the next chain and place another mini bean stitch into the next. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, insert your hook into that same chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, 4 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 4 loops, then chain 1 to secure. Now just repeat that down, so skip the next chain and mini bean into the next. And as usual, whenever you're working into the foundation chain, that's the hardest part, so it will get easier from here. Skip the next chain, mini bean into the next. And I personally, whenever I have a loop on my hook, I like to use my index finger to hold it down so that it doesn't fall off. When you have 2 chains left, you should skip the next chain and place a mini bean in the last chain. So this is what row 1 should look like. Now for row 2, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. So we're going to place our first mini bean stitch into the side of the mini bean from the previous row. So what you're going to do is pull your stitches apart, and this is where we will be inserting our hook. Then yarn over, insert your hook into that same side space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through all 4 loops, and chain 1 to secure. So your first mini bean is in the side of that last mini bean, and we're just going to continue that down. So moving on to the next mini bean, we're going to pull it apart to see the side of the mini bean from the previous round, and that is where we'll insert our hook. Now, if you're having a hard time finding the side of the mini bean, you can always turn your work so you're looking at the top, and you're going to be skipping 1 stitch, and then the mini bean will go into the next stitch. So it's just like you're skipping a stitch. When you reach the end of the row, you will have 1 mini bean stitch left. So again, we're skipping the next stitch and placing our last mini bean into the last stitch, which is still the side of that first mini bean from the previous round. And this is what it should look like after row 2. Now from this point forward, all we'll be doing is repeating row 2. So remember to add that extra chain before you turn your work and move on to the next row. After 15 rows, this is what it should look like. And that's how you crochet the mini bean stitch. For our next stitch, we're going to learn how to crochet the crunch stitch. You can see that it is a reversible stitch. It looks exactly the same on the other side. It's very textured and beautiful and would make a wonderful blanket. In order for the crunch stitch to work, we have to create a foundation chain in multiples of 2 plus 1. So first create your slip knot, and we are going to chain 23. Now after you chain 23, we're going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain from your hook. So here's the first chain, the 2nd chain, and the 3rd chain. So to slip stitch, you're going to insert your hook into that 3rd chain, yarn over, pull the loop through the chain, and then through the loop on your hook. And that's a slip stitch. Now half double crochet into the next stitch, and a half double crochet is a half treble in the UK. So we're going to find our next stitch, which is right here, and yarn over your hook, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Now slip stitch into the next chain. So here's the stitch we just worked into, and here's our next chain. So to slip stitch, insert your hook into that next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and through the loop on your hook. And just repeat that pattern down the row. And just remember that if you're first starting out, the first row is always the trickiest because it's hard to hold your chain as you go, especially when you're learning a new stitch. So don't be discouraged, just keep trying, and I promise you'll get the hang of it. Whenever you're making your slip stitches, you'll want to make sure that you do them loosely, because if you do them too tight, they'll be hard to recognize while you're working. This is probably the trickier of all the stitches. But if you're having trouble learning this one, or if you notice that your stitches are too tight, use a larger hook size than recommended for your yarn. It will help loosen up your stitches, and you'll be able to see them and understand the construction of it a little bit better. And you should be slip stitching into the last chain of the row. This is what it should look like at the end of row 1. Now for row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn your work. Now for row 2, we're going to slip stitch into the next half double crochet. So we're going to skip this first stitch because that's our slip stitch from the previous round, and we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And this isn't your stitch here. You have to turn your work up a little bit so you can see the tops of the stitches. So make sure you're working into the top of the stitch. So we're going to slip stitch into that half double crochet from the previous round. And then you're going to half double crochet into your slip stitch. Now this might seem difficult, but once you see the placement, it's not so bad. So I'm going to lift my hook up just so I can show you here. This is the back of our work. To see the top of the stitches, we're just going to tilt it down this way. So you can see here that this next stitch is this. This is a slip stitch, and then half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, and so on. So here is our slip stitch. Whenever you look at the back of the stitch to where you're going to insert it, it doesn't look like a stitch, like it's hard to recognize. So just make sure that you're going in here, right in between this stitch here. So this is where you should insert your hook. So now we're going to half double crochet into that next slip stitch. Now slip stitch into the next half double crochet. And then half double crochet into the next slip stitch. And repeat that down. So slip stitch into the next stitch. And remember, when you're creating these slip stitches, try not to make them too tight. And then half double crochet into the next. So we're going to half double crochet into our last slip stitch. And because our chain 2 turning chain counts as a stitch, don't forget to slip stitch into that last stitch, which is the 2 chains that we skipped on the foundation row. So just insert your hook into that top chain from the chain 2. And to make this a little bit easier for you, whenever you chain 2 at the beginning of the row, make the second loop a little bit more loose than the first. So right now, to move on to row 3, we're going to chain 2. And then for the second chain, I'm going to pull up just a little bit and make that second loop. So it's a little bit more loose. That way, whenever you insert your hook at the end of the next row, it's going to be easier to do. Now turn your work. And we're just going to continue repeating row 2. So because that half double crochet counts as a stitch, I'm going to skip this very first stitch here and slip stitch into the next stitch. Half double crochet into the next stitch. Slip stitch into the next stitch. Half double crochet into the next. And then just continue repeating row 2 until you reach your desired length. So this is what the crunch stitch will start to look like around row 21. All right, so that is it for our 5 beginner-friendly crochet stitches that are perfect for blankets. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and each of the stitches that I've shown you today. Let me know in the comments which stitch is your favorite. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you're notified anytime I release a new video. I'll see you in the next one. Yarn over. And we're going to repeat that. Yes, Roman. What's that? No, hold on.